Welcome to the Dom Sub Devotion Podcast. Every episode of Dom Sub Devotion is an authentic reflection of our real life in a loving 24/7 DS marriage. If you crave the passion and intensity of a power exchange dynamic inside of a deeply loving and intimate relationship, you've found the right place. You can always find more from us in the show notes and at infinitedevotion.com. Thank you for listening.
A little while ago, I had a client that does one-on-one coaching with me say to me after getting to know me a little bit in the one-on-one context, and he'd listened to probably all 70, 80 some hours of this podcast and my other one, Conscious Dominance. And after getting to know me a little bit one-on-one, he said, it's really good to know that you're human too, that you didn't just come out of the womb like this. And I didn't just come out of the womb like this. I have been through an absolute gauntlet of personal growth as a man to be able to be where I am, to be where I am in being able to lead you in my own life, in everything that I'm able to do. So what I wanted to do here today is to give a little bit of voice to something that has been probably the hardest thing for me to overcome and work through, and that is insecurity. And I want to do that because I'm hoping that it gives some permission to men who are pursuing dominance, who want to be a dominant, who want to be strong and masculine, alpha, whatever the words are they want to use to describe the kind of man that they want to be. I want to talk through the concept of insecurity and what it's been for me, to show men what it is that makes doing this work worth it. Because if you would have asked me 10 years ago if I was insecure, I probably would have gotten upset and denied it and said that I wasn't insecure, that I was very secure.
How would have you described yourself besides secure?
Confident, successful. I looked at myself as being a very well-respected person. And in my community, in my business life, I was looked up to. I was the chair of everything and the leader of everything. I was the person who everyone called on to take charge of everything that needed taking charge of. And I got a lot of my self-worth from how it was perceived by others.
I think that's pretty natural. For a while, at least.
So I would have not thought of myself as insecure. And I certainly think I did a hell of a job at making myself appear to have it all together.
Yes, you did.
I fooled a lot of people, myself included. But underneath, inside, there was always this crippling sense of insecurity. More so than I ever really let on to you. And I'm going to talk about it today. And I'm going to talk about it for my own sake, and I'm going to talk about it for the men who need to hear that it's okay to be where you are. Because we can't start growing until we accept ourselves where we're at. We can't go anywhere forward when we are just going in reverse. So that is the primary arc of everything I want to share here today. And I don't even know exactly where this is all going to go. But the primary takeaway that I'm hoping that people get from this is that as a man, working on yourself doesn't make you weaker, it makes you stronger. So the place I want to start with this really, I know, surprise, surprise, goes back to childhood.
Always.
It always does. But why does it go back to childhood? It goes back to childhood because that's when we learn who it is that we think we need to be. And we also learn how to shut down our true selves because we think we have to be something other than we are in order to be accepted, in order to be loved. And the first thing that I want to put some language to today is this word sensitivity. Because I was a very sensitive kid. I took a lot of crap for it from the other boys in school, especially, once you hit that age where boys start being in competition with each other to look cool and, whatever.
Describe what that was for you then. What did it look like to be a sensitive kid? What did it feel like?
It just always felt like I felt more. And I don't know if I felt more or if they were just better at shutting it off at a younger age. Who knows? But yeah, I always had more of a connection to people. It felt like I liked people, and I did feel things. And in part, I attribute a lot of that to my father, but also I attribute it to growing up, spending a lot of time alone in the quiet, in nature, in the country. But that word sensitive is one that men don't get, don't understand, and tend to run and hide from. So I've been explaining that word to men lately in this way. A lot of times when we hear sensitive, we think about sharing our feelings or gushing about our feelings, like that's what we're supposed to be, because that's, I think, how a lot of men perceive women. When we see a woman, we call her sensitive. She's very expressive, and so we think that that's what it is. But I want to challenge people to think about sensitivity different. Think about it like a scientific instrument, like a scale, for example. If I go to the grocery store and they've got those scales that are like hanging by the bananas, and you throw some bananas in there and you can go, yeah, it's about 2 pounds. That is not a very sensitive scale. But a scale that I can put 1 grain of sand on or 2 grains of sand on and have it tell the difference, that is a very sensitive scale. It's sensitive to differences, to changes, to things, to very minor fluctuations. So this is, to me, what sensitivity is. I didn't understand this when I was a kid, obviously. But to me, that's what sensitivity really is it's the ability to tune into little changes, little differences, the most minuscule of shifts in your energy, for example. I feel them, and I feel them immediately. Sometimes I think even before you do.
Probably so. Sometimes.
So that's what I'm talking about when I'm talking about sensitivity, attunement, connection to the world around you. And that's what I always felt that I had, was a connection to the world around me, an ability to notice it. Again, I think spending a lot of time in nature had a lot to do with that. Because when you're an 8-year-old and you go out and you build a tree fort, which is really just some sticks nailed into the side of a tree till you can climb up there and sit in the tree. But I'd sit up there for hours and watch the squirrels. And we had these huge oak trees in the woods around where I grew up. Massive oak trees, 2-3 feet across. And I would climb myself up in one, and I would sit there for hours and watch the birds and the squirrels and the animals. And just, even, I can imagine it now, like feeling the wind and like the direction of the wind and how it hit me. I was just always very tuned into the world around me. So then when you go to school and boys start playing the macho game, I never really had that in me. And boys that don't have that in them, especially in a blue-collar, small Midwest town, I just got run over in middle school. It was brutal. So, like anyone does, because when we're that young, we don't know what we're doing, I tried to fit in. I tried to be a part of the group of people that I wanted to be friends with, who really just loved to make fun of me. Now that I can see it, I was the butt of the jokes for that group. I was kind of the one who tagged along, and then they all got to laugh at teasing me to each other. So that's what that was for me. So that was fun.
I have to say, that makes my heart hurt a little bit.
It does mine too, because I can see how that was building the pattern of self-abandonment. I was trying to show up in a way that got me liked by the people that I considered friends.
It's understandable.
And that's what egos are. That's what they're built out of. Things that had already happened in my life earlier than that gave me the energetic signature of the fear of losing, for example. It was in large part the fear of people pulling away from me if they didn't like me. So I tried really hard to be liked, or if I didn't do a good job, or if I just did something wrong. I had the fear that people would pull away from me. So then here I am in this situation, probably 11, 12, 13 years old, with these other boys who I wanted to be friends with. The more they teased me, the more I basically chased them around and tried to be included. Again, I'm sharing some of these stories because this was the reality of my life and some of what I've had to work through and work to overcome. Because then by the time I'm 11, 12, 13 and I'm chasing those other kids around that I want to be friends with, I'm already living out a pattern that I developed at a much younger age at home in response to things that happened with me, that happened in my family with my parents, and the meanings that I made out of them. So I was trying to protect myself already at that age, and just reaffirming what I already thought, which is that I'm not good enough. People don't want me. And all number of other things. And school got better for me in high school. I went to a big enough school that I found a crew that I fit into, and that sensitivity actually turned out to be a very big gift as I started to pursue music. Because the same thing that made that sensitivity a part of me made me extremely good at attuning to other musicians and to the music that we were making, and making excellent music. So high school actually got quite a bit better for me than earlier. But I was still a part of the cast of misfits, and the choir kids and the outcasts. Kind of hung out with the kids that wore the long black trench coats and corn t-shirts, fedoras. I had a fedora at one point.
That is kind of hard to imagine. I have seen pictures of what you looked like back then.
I didn't wear the black trench coats. I didn't wear the corn t-shirts.
Oh, okay.
But I hung out with the kids that did.
Okay.
Like, those were my high school friends. That was my high school crew. And side note for the music lovers, I didn't get Tool and Korn in the 90s. It took me about 20 years later to understand how awesome those bands were.
Those were not in my CD cases.
No, you had all DC Talk.
Oh, I had a mix, but I definitely had the Christian rock, I guess you'd call it.
Yeah, if you could call that rock.
I don't know, I just called it, I think back then it was just Christian music.
So, a couple of those stories just to kind of tell where I came from. That I didn't come out of the womb this way. I wasn't born with this sense of like solid inner strength, and just nothing ever got to me. I had, from and through all of how I adapted to and coped with all of the shit from my childhood, there was this division between who I was, and this is true for anyone, for every man listening to this. This is true for everyone. We all split ourselves. And there is the person that we are naturally, and then there's the person that we try to become to gain acceptance, to get validation, to be lovable, to be wanted by other people, to fit in, to whatever. And that version of ourselves, like that version of me was not me. It was me playing a part, trying to act cool, trying to act interesting, trying to be impressive to girls, trying to, when I started dating, it really kicked in, because then I wasn't just trying to be the boyfriend, I was trying to be the perfect boyfriend. It was like, buy all of the flowers on all of the days, buy all of the teddy bears and the chocolates on Valentine's Day, and like over the top. Not that romantic gestures aren't sweet, but it was over the top. And it was especially because it was needy. It wasn't coming from a place of really wanting to give. It was coming from, if I do all these things, you're going to like me, right? And that's just one of the places that this insecurity that really became such a crippling thing for me as my life went on started to crop up, even in my early years, because I was trying so hard to do the right thing, to do the good thing, to be what I thought I was supposed to be. And the reason, as far as I can tell, that created so much insecurity in me was because I was not being myself. I was trying to be like me plus. me, but more of me, a better version of me. And that's faking it. It's living out a fake life. And then when it doesn't work, what am I left with? I'm left with the gap between who I tried to be and who I really am. And that's the root of insecurity. It's the space, the amount of space in between who you really are and who you're trying to be, or how you're trying to fake it. And the bigger that gap gets, the more the insecurity gets. So what did I do? Again, what everyone does until they realize it. And some people never realize it. I feel very blessed to have realized and recognized this pattern, but it took me a long time. I've used the analogy of running 100 miles an hour in the wrong direction. That's what I'm talking about here. This is this encapsulates all of the ways that I ran 100 miles an hour in the wrong direction in my life. So what did I do when I had one girlfriend in high school? I'll give a romantic relationship example, who, first of all, broke up with me when she got back from a summer trip to Australia, the summer after our junior year of high school, because she supposedly met someone in Australia and fell in love with him. And then we got back together for a brief time until I went over to her house to visit her, and she was getting fucked by another guy in her hot tub.
Ouch.
I hadn't thought about that story until I started to tell it for a long time. And so that's how I knew we were really broken up. So then, what did I do after that? First of all, blamed myself, because I must not have been good enough. And I think a lot of people do this when they go through that first heartbreak, that first breakup, where they really felt like they loved someone. I beat myself up pretty bad over it. And so then I was bound and determined to be even more of me plus next time, right? If this didn't work, clearly I didn't do enough. Because the reason we show up like that, again, it's because of that sensitivity. It's because of the way of how much we feel as men and how sensitively we feel. Going all the way back to when we're pre-verbal, we learn by the way that other people act around us, the facial expressions they make, like these tiny little grains of sand on that scale that train us to be how we're supposed to be, how we're not supposed to be. And so we start lying, living differently. This is what Gabor Mate calls authenticity versus attachment, where we choose to do what keeps our attachment figures, our caretakers, present in our lives, versus doing what we want to do. So that's like the root of self-abandonment. So that projected forward then into this relationship, for example. Now I'm trying to do what she wants me to do, or what I think she wants me to do based on what I've learned you're supposed to do, quote unquote, supposed to do. So it didn't work so well that I figured I must need to do more. And the next real relationship that I had in college, oh boy, did I pour it on. I really poured it on. Since we're going full on vulnerability mode here, I will admit to all of our listeners something that I did in what was probably my freshman year of college. I started reading Cosmo.
I think you told me this before.
I think I've told you. I have not told the tens of thousands of people that are going to listen to this. I started reading Cosmo because I wanted to figure out what the perfect man would be like so I could be that. And when I, somehow or another, maybe it was my charm, maybe it was my ridiculous good looks, I started dating the head football cheerleader at my college in my sophomore year, my second year of school. And that poor girl, I wish I could find her and apologize for how over the top I was, because once we started dating, like I just poured that neediness on to the max. I can just look back and see how much of the way that I showed up there was driven by insecurity. It was, I'm not okay. I need you to like me to prove that to me that I'm okay. I need you to want me to prove to me that I'm desirable. So that continued on until that neediness broke that relationship. And then I met who became my first wife because, well, it didn't work very well the last two times. So now I'm going to latch on. And I was with her up until I was with you. And I continued to play out those same patterns of insecurity because I was trying so hard to be someone I wasn't. I did the same thing in my career. In college, I abandoned my music degree for a business degree within the first month of being at college. And that was because I wanted to make money. I wanted to have financial success. I wanted a bigger, better life. And I thought that was the way to it. So yeah, I ditched the music degree. I started pursuing business and started making money, started a sales job, selling cars to pay my way through college. And I was good at it. And I made a lot of money as a college kid. So that just ramped up even more this fake version of myself that I was building. This version of me that I thought was the good version, right? First person in my family to go to college. I graduated in 2.5 years. I was making 6-figure income at 19, 20 years old, selling cars. Keep in mind, this was in the late 90s, so that was a lot of money back then. So it was all about reputation. It was all about looks. It was all about perception. It was all about trying to garner some sense of self-worth from what other people thought of me, from having money, having a cool job, driving a cool car. But I was, again, ditching out on so much of who I really was that this gap between the real me and the version of me that was showing up was just becoming a chasm, a canyon. So that's where, in those little moments, that little whisper of never enough. It's never enough. It's never good enough. Always need more. And I kept right on doing this all the way up until I started really I kept doing this up till about 10 years ago. So this started in childhood, and really I didn't start to even see the pattern until I was 34, 35 years old. So, lots of ways that it played out. My business that I started, that where we met, because I hired you. I only started that because I wanted to make a lot of money and be seen as successful. And I did make a lot of money, and I was seen as successful.
And you were successful.
I was successful at being the fake version of myself, yeah.
That's the societal determination of success.
Mm-hmm. I've called it before, like, being the king of the suburbs. I had the big house, I had the nice savings account, I had first I had a shit ton of debt because I tried to buy my way into success, so I got myself into overwhelming amount of debt. Dug out of that. Point being, I was not born this way. It got to the point, the chasm got so big, it got to the point that I couldn't handle anything going wrong in my life. Because it was like everything was propped up. It was a house of cards. And if anything went wrong, if you were upset, like the worst thing that could ever happen to me is when you got upset. Because that to me felt like the ultimate judgment of everything that I was as a man. You know, think about that, how much power I gave you. You didn't even want it. You didn't ask for it. But my insecurity gave you that much power over my state. I would shut down. I would lose my shit. I was never an angry person, so it was either a shutdown or I would just go into like massive defensiveness and neediness and try to force you to change how you felt, basically, because I needed you to feel okay for me to feel okay. So that's where it came from. That's where I came from. And, you know, what does that feeling of insecurity feel like? It feels like I'm never good enough. Doesn't matter what I do, how much I give, it's never enough. It's crushing. I've used the word crippling a couple times. That's how it felt. But if you look at that word insecurity, it means not secure, lacking security. Security in what? In myself, in who I am.
Feeling whole.
Yeah. Yeah, you heard the phrase like a shell of a man? Or a shell of a person? It's like, yeah, the outside is there, but the inside is gone. And that's where a lot of times things start to crop up to fill that hole, to fill that void, that emptiness. And the thing that I never realized back then is that I was never empty. The emptiness was that I felt. You'd use all the words. Hopelessness. I felt lost. That was feeling how far away from my true self that I really was.
So you've shared before that you got to a point where, you know, we weren't having the sex that you wanted to have. Our relationship wasn't looking the way you wanted it to be. And you recognize that I need to make myself into a man she wants.
This is probably sorry, go ahead and finish. Were you going somewhere?
Well, I'm curious if initially that was still coming from a little bit of this insecurity. Or, I guess.
Well, everything was coming from insecurity at that point, but this was also one of the first moments of really recognizing that I couldn't fake it anymore. Because this was the moment where our sex life had dwindled to the point where we had sex most months, but there were a couple months that we didn't. That was about the worst that it got. And I remember laying in bed next to you one night, and at this point, mind you, I'm probably 80 pounds heavier than I am now, and not the same guy that you married. I remember laying there next to you and trying to talk you into wanting me, because you didn't. And the fact that you didn't was just like twisting at that insecurity, because I already didn't feel like I was good enough in myself. And I was trying to, what we do when we're insecure is we try to fill that lack of feeling good enough with external resources. And so you, as my wife, my partner, I was needing that from you, and you couldn't even, there's no way you could pretend that you wanted me, so you didn't pretend. And when you said, you can do what you want to me, I don't really want to, but I'm willing to let you, was probably the second most humiliating, embarrassing thing I've ever been through in my life. And that was a moment that I made a promise to myself that I was not going to try to talk you into. I realized in that moment, what I realized and recognized was that I couldn't convince you to actually authentically want something. That you didn't feel that desire, and there was no amount of talking about it that was going to change that. So that moment was a turning point, and it was, yes, it was born out of insecurity, but it was the birth of seeing beyond it too, and recognizing it. Because I went on a years-long journey that started, I found the journals when we were packing to move, the very beginning of that, and it was September of 2014. So we're recording this in December of 2024, so when I found them, it was almost exactly 10 years, like to the week. And that decade has been a decade of sorting out who I am. And really closing that gap, closing that chasm between who I really am and all of these ways that I continued to show up and act the part and fake it and try to get something without earning it, and to fill a void that I felt in myself with anything and everything, with money, with substances, with you, with like my whole life, my job, everything I did was all about, I needed to have a sterling reputation, a huge bank account, a nice house. It was all just, it was all fake. And the last decade has been a decade of me sorting out who it is that I really am and trying to close that gap one step at a time. And it's been gut-wrenching. Don Miguel Ruiz in the Four Agreements says that our biggest fear as human beings isn't dying. Our biggest fear is to truly be alive. Because to be truly alive, we have to close that gap. Look all the way back to the way I was acting as a 11, 12-year-old boy trying to get my friends to like me. Farther back than that, the ways that I was acting to try to influence my parents to give me what I wanted or to show affection towards me. All the way back to that. I've had to go all the way back into the deepest depths of everything that has happened in my life and make sense of it through a new lens, through a lens of who am I really, not who am I trying to be for anyone else.
So what I'm hearing you say is it requires some very straightforward honesty with yourself.
Brutal honesty, yeah.
And I'm guessing a lot of compassion.
I've had to go through a lot of this work to even find a sense of compassion. I didn't have a lot of that, not for myself. I had some of it for other people, sometimes. But I also didn't ever feel sorry for anyone. I had a lot of walls up around giving a shit about how anybody else felt.
So what is that like then, getting to that point where you see, like, I'm being someone I'm not, and yet maybe not even really knowing who you are completely? How do you even step forward and reconcile that difference?
Well, you don't know who you are when you start this journey. You can't, because that's the fear of being alive. I've stuffed everything that I am to be everything that I'm not. So it's buried extremely deep in the subconscious. It's still there. It never went anywhere. It's still, that sense of self is still whole and complete. And that's hard to fathom when you're at the beginning of this. When I tell that to men who are at the beginning of this journey, that you are a whole, complete, infinite being who's always been perfect, the ego will say, the fuck I am. So starting to get back to who I really was, for me, it was a journey of undoing. You don't have to know who you are, but you can recognize everything you're not. So I remember a part of this journey, it was, a little over a year into it, January 1st of 2016, I made a decision that I was going to quit everything that I was a part of. I was chair of boards of directors. I was on advisory councils. I was a part of networking groups. I was in all kinds of stuff. And I was in charge of a lot of it. On January 2nd, I called in or emailed and quit every single one of them. That was a part of it. Clearing out space in my life, saying no to all this shit that I recognized was not me. That it was me playing some part, some role, trying to gain notoriety, reputation, whatever. So that is a great place to start. Is what do I know is just, even if you don't understand what the role is that you're playing, it's some piece of hay on top of the haystack that's like way up here. Like, you just start taking stuff off, let go of things, leave them behind, and trust that if you let go of something and it's actually meant to be a part of your life, it won't go away. It won't go anywhere. I remember telling you this, you can't lose something that's real. So you can let go of anything. If it's real, it won't go anywhere. And that's really what getting underneath that insecurity is all about, is it's security exists inside of that being of yourself. It's when you close that canyon into a chasm, into a gap, into a space, into every once in a while there's a little crack that you have to jump over and realize you need to just like fill it up so that you can live what I call living in spirit, which is when your soul, the truth of who you are, is living freely in your body. Your day-to-day life is you being yourself. That is the only way past insecurity, because you eliminate the cause of it, which is faking it, being a liar.
I want to chat about what happened then after. Okay, so January 2nd, you quit all these things. Granted, that was a little while ago and life looked different at that time. But if I remember right, you then took some of that time and you went back to nature.
Yeah, I started spending a lot of time outside, out in nature, doing a lot of writing, a lot of journaling. And frankly, I really started to struggle with my identity. I really started to struggle with like the concept of legacy. I know you and I have had lots of discussions about this. I used to really, really be obsessed with leaving some kind of a legacy, which broke even more later in that year in 2016 when we found out we weren't going to be able to have kids. And I'd cleared out so much of my life and who I thought I was. And then when I realized that the door was closed on me being a father, that made it harder, but better in some ways. In the long run, it's a great example of how I got what I needed in that, even though it wasn't what I wanted at the time, it never happened. If we had had children together, now granted, it would have been a blessing. It would have been wonderful in its own way. It would have also perpetuated everything about the false self that I had built up and created. It would have just given it a new outlet. So because even that broke, and then over time, everything else broke, everything that I thought that I was gone. And what I was left with was myself and you and some money, thankfully. But that's about it. So, yeah, I mean, that period was really like the beginning of several years of identity crisis for me. Boy, it must have been fun to be married to back then. But also in that, I started taking care of myself. I started working out. I started eating better. I started losing the weight that I'd put on since we'd gotten married. And I started taking care of my health. One of the best things I ever did, I don't know if I've shared this on the podcast, but I think this would probably been towards the end of 2017. I went in and got my testosterone checked. One of the things that I did as a kid was I played baseball. I was a catcher. And I took a lot of baseballs between the legs when I was a young boy. Never really got myself looked at or had anyone question it, but I had the testosterone levels of a 90-year-old man. That wasn't helping me at all. So getting that dealt with, among other things, even though I was in this extended period of an identity crisis. Everything was breaking while I was also building up some sense of who I really was by taking care of my health, taking care of my body. And yeah, some of it was driven by I wanted you to want me. But in the process of becoming who I thought I needed to be for you to want me, I found who I really was. Or I started to find it. And over time, I've just really come to like myself. One of the things that I think is so special about this work and doing this deep work as a man is I've come to a point where, I said before I couldn't handle anything of you being upset or not being happy with me, or even if you were upset about something that had nothing to do with me, it wrecked me. And then if you were upset about something that did have something to do with me, it was like a death blow. Again, because it hit right at that insecurity. What I didn't realize at the time is that disapproval of me was poking underneath the surface of this fake self. For example, when you were unhappy with how I looked when I was so overweight, well, why was I overweight? I was overweight because I was eating too much, not exercising, because I didn't value myself enough to take care of myself. So when you're unhappy with my weight, what I'm feeling get poked in me, it's not just my weight. I was unhappy with it too. It was poking at the deeper reason why I had put on all that weight in the first place. So as I continued to stand up for myself, take care of myself, going to the gym and working out was a huge part of finding a sense of self-respect, because I started treating my body like it mattered. For me, I had to start taking a shot in the ass every week of testosterone just to get up to normal human levels to find that motivation again. I didn't realize there was medical stuff going on beyond the emotional that was playing into it. So as I've continued to do this work now, there's less and less, and I can't say there's none, but I used to live every moment of every day in some sense of a upset, frustration, disapproval of reality, defensiveness, reactivity, every moment of every day, from the time I woke up till the time I went to bed. Now the moments of that energy, I don't even experience them every week. So, and when I do, I'm generally excited about it, because I've recognized I found another crack. Well, now I can look at that crack. I can see, who am I versus who am I trying to be? What am I trying to fake here? How can I let go of something to just show up as myself? Because then I can come to you or anyone else in my life and say, this is me. You can take it, you can leave it. It makes no difference to me, because I'm good with me.
So you're saying it gets easier?
It gets easier and easier and easier with time. But it's still brutal at times. A part of why I wanted to record this episode is because I do not want to put myself out here as this internet perfect person who's never had any problems. I've been through the fucking gauntlet to be able to, for example, earlier today, when you were feeling some really big, really deep emotions, and I was also in the middle of some pretty big, pretty deep, heavy stuff that I was working through for myself, I'm able to handle all of me and still be there for you and not get reactive. There's no part of me anymore that felt like I would have in the past. In the past, I would have been like, can't you see I'm going through something? Don't you care about how I feel? That would have been how I showed up 10 years ago. Now it's like I can be with everything that I have going on, and I can hold you. And I can hold dozens of our clients when they're sharing some of the heaviest stuff that they're going through with me. And it doesn't faze me because I'm not living a lie. I'm not living a fake life anymore.
I used to find myself in those moments where it's like, oh, you find someone new on social media and they put themselves together in a certain way. And it's really easy to make that assumption that they have life figured out, or they haven't been through anything hard, or like, it's really easy to make those assumptions about other people. But the important thing to know is that we all are human. And so to accept your humanness wherever you're at is extremely important. And accept your reality of your life experience with compassion.
So a couple of things that men who maybe are listening to this can do with what I've shared here today. Because I didn't just share this for my own good. I shared what I did here today because I want men to recognize that it's okay to be wherever you're at. You don't have to fake it. The faking it is the problem, not the solution. You don't have to try to prop yourself up and make yourself look better than you are. Let yourself be where you are. You can't take a single step until you're on the ground. If you're faking it, you're somewhere up in midair and your feet might be moving, but you're not going to go anywhere. You've got to get on the ground. You have to get into acceptance of reality. That's men and women both. You can't go anywhere until you are in acceptance of reality. If you're a man who's watching this and you are wanting to start to get out of that insecurity, out of that sense of not being good enough, if you're wanting to move beyond that feeling in your life, start with just thinking about this podcast here. Could you just go reveal all of the hardest shit you've been through in your life to an unknown number of thousands of people? For me to be able to do this, I couldn't have done this 10 years ago. I couldn't have sat down here and talked about all of this stuff that I didn't like about myself. That was what I was trying to hide. So just think about that in itself. What is it that you don't want anyone to know about you? Start asking yourself, what can you not be okay with? Because whatever you can't accept in terms of reality is what controls you. And start looking at the ways that you show up that are defensive, where you get aggressive, where you maybe lash out, or where you shut down. Start paying attention to the way that you act. And especially start paying attention to where you're expecting to get something without having to earn it or deserve it. If you're trying to talk someone into, for example, like I did with you, trying to talk you into wanting me, well, even if I succeed in talking you into something, you still don't feel anything different. You feel what you feel. That's a response to who I am and how you are perceiving me. The only way to change that is to change myself, to be better. So if you're willing to just start taking a look at where in your life you're hiding, where you are avoiding things, where you lash out, what is it that doesn't feel okay inside of you? And then also at the same time start to look at what are some of the things from earlier in my life that point more to who I am. That sensitivity for me is a core part of who I am. I use it now every day. I use it in leading you. I use it in the way that I teach other men and women to relate to each other in a healthier way. I use that sensitivity as an absolute skill and gift, and I wield it very well now because I'm comfortable with it. I'm in ownership of it. It isn't a source of insecurity for me anymore because I'm not trying to avoid it. So start looking at those things that you had to shut off in order to be accepted, in order to get loved. Parts of you that you are convinced cause problems if you let them out of the bag. The parts of you that you can't imagine letting anyone else know existed. One of those for me was dominance and submission, my desire to be a dominant that I had stuffed and hidden for so long that it took until 2018 when I find end of 2018. So if I started this work in 2014, it was 4 years of working on myself before I ever got to a point of bringing that question up to you. And then also, you keep hearing me talk about 10 years, 4 years, 6 years. Like, slow the fuck down. Take your time. You spent your whole life becoming the version of yourself you are today. I spent my whole life getting so far away from who I was. I could not expect it to just get fixed like that. And don't be afraid of being yourself. It is going to feel like your biggest fear. And the more afraid you feel of revealing some part of yourself, the more afraid you feel of showing up in a certain way, the more likely that's probably something actually really important for you. You're not afraid of doing something that has no sense of attachment, that doesn't have any energy attached to it. You're not afraid of showing up and doing something, acting a certain way, asking for something, being a certain way. There's no fear attached to it unless you're trying to avoid it.
You taught me that quite a while ago, and at the beginning I was like, fuck no.
Exactly.
And now my life has proven to me that it's true. It is. It really is.
So your fears are gifts, and
Absolutely they are.
what you're afraid of is generally what you're excited by, and what you're excited by is pointing you towards something that is true about yourself. So all of this makes you, as a man, it makes you stronger. You've got to go through the shit. You have to unwind all of the fake, false self that you've built. You have to let go of so much of that pretending that you've done. And frankly, you're probably going to have to let go of some parts of your life that you thought were actually parts of your life. There's been a lot of, there's almost nothing left of my life from 2014 besides you. Think about that. 10 years. There's really nothing left of what was in my life in 2014.
The Jeep was probably the last thing.
The Jeep and the boat that we sold this summer, those came into my life in 2014. So
Okay, both of them.
but job, reputation, it's so much of who I thought I was is I've let go of all of it, and something better has taken its place. And I continue to be committed to myself because now I actually feel like I matter, like I deserve to have the life that I want to have. That I deserve great things. I didn't feel like I had to do great things in order to get something, in order to feel good about myself. I already feel good about myself. And so then, because I feel good about myself, I believe that I deserve great things in my life. And I believe that I'm worthy of having my life look the way that I want it to look, and to experience what I want to experience. Not because I need to get anything out of it, but because I matter. So, thank you to everyone for listening to this. I hope this is in some way helpful, valuable, inspirational for men to just know that if you're feeling that sense of insecurity in yourself, it can get better. Don't give up. And it's worth whatever it takes to come home to your true self.
I just want to say thank you to you. Coming home to yourself, to finding your own worth, and believing it and feeling it and living it and being an example for everyone, including me. Because you've mirrored acceptance and worthiness to me, and I've been able to tap into who I am because of you. And you've changed my life. So thank you. I love you so much.
Love you too. I could not be here without all of the ways that you have shown up for me and mirrored back to me what I needed to see. You've been that loyal, pure sense of love to me at the times when I felt like I deserved it the least. You never let me get away with anything. Not even for a minute. And that is the most valuable thing about you to me, is that you don't take my shit. And sometimes that not taking my shit is your fear. But sometimes it's really showing me something about myself. And I wouldn't be where I am without you, because of how much you've continued to mirror back to me. And, frankly, make me question myself constantly. I say that in the best possible way, not questioning my value or my worthiness, but really, am I showing up the best that I can? Could I be better? Because I'm committed to a life that's as good as it could get. So now, rather than collapsing in unworthiness when you are unhappy, instead I look at it through a very different lens. And that's why you wear that collar for me.